Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with App House combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Back for another week.
Back for another week. And it has been a busy week. It's a busy news week this week. We were discussing before the show about all the articles and we started talking about them. I was like, what about the other one? And George is like, oh, that one. Okay, yeah, we'll put that at the end. What about this one? Oh, I didn't even see that one. I'm like, we talked about it for like a day. What are you talking about? It's like, oh, no, don't worry about it. Moving on. And then in the process, we got George fired up from his lack of sleep. So he's now sufficiently triggered to do the show.
I'd say I'm fired up just because of your insolence, mate. Okay, deliberately trying to trigger me in the pre-show. So we've got so what, for good radio, for ratings? Is that what this is all about?
It's all about the ratings, mate. That's literally all it comes down to. You boil it all down, all the bullshit in the world, you boil it all down. It's all about ratings.
Speaking about bullshit getting a lot of ratings, Gurner Group founder Tim Gurner had a week, had several weeks all at once this week.
He and his enormous forehead.
Now, I don't like to make fun. Hang on, Tom. I don't like to make fun of people's physical characteristics on the show for the purposes of this bit. Let me get it out. And but this man's forehead's so big that he got a 5 head. You know what I'm saying? This guy's got a half a dozen head. He's got a real big head. And I only say that because the fact that he's got such a big head seems to have poisoned his brain a little bit. You know what I mean? Like it's possible to have such an overinflated sense of your position and your like disconnect from society that it could be considered a mind altering substance. That's how big his head is.
Who is Tim Gurner and why should we care?
Well, Tim Gurner is a rich white bloke who started his own company, self-made man. Okay. All he got was a small loan. From his grandfather.
A bit of an inheritance. Some good old family money. Multimillionaire property developer and CEO of Gurner Group, which I assume, property development. I think they might run like spas or something. I don't know.
So they develop property is probably what we're saying as their main business activity.
Yeah.
And what did he say the other day?
So Mr. Gurner got in front of, he was being interviewed for the Financial Review Property Summit and had a real spicy take on millennials that went, shall we say, international. And it's not often that an Australian CEO fucks up on so grand a scale as to catch the attention of Mr. Bernard Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez over in the US. But Tim Gurner managed to do it. So let's listen to some of his spicy takes on workers since COVID.
I think the problem that we've had is that we have people decided they didn't really want to work so much anymore through COVID, and that has had a massive issue on productivity. You know, tradies have definitely pulled back on productivity. You know, they have been paid a lot to do not too much in the last few years, and we need to see that change. We need to see unemployment rise. Unemployment has to jump 40, 50%, in my view. We need to see pain in the economy. We need to remind people that they work for the employer, not the other way around. I mean, there's been a systematic change where employees feel the employer is extremely lucky to have them, as opposed to the other way around. So it's a dynamic that has to change. We've got to kill that attitude, and that has to come through hurting the economy, which is what the whole global, the world is trying to do. The governments around the world are trying to increase unemployment to get that to some sort of normality. And we're seeing it. I think every employer now is seeing it. I mean, there is definitely massive layoffs going off. People might not be talking about it, but people are definitely laying people off, and we're starting to see less arrogance in the employment market, and that has to continue because that will cascade across the cost balance.
Arrogance.
There's so much in there. I feel for me, the sentence that hits me the most, because obviously he's saying the quiet part loud, as sort of said, but I think...
Can't believe these plebs are asking for human rights.
Yeah, the really, really quiet part that he said really, really loud was, we need pain in the economy.
Which
like the pain he's referring to is people like having their lives ruined, like of maybe starving or homelessness and desperation.
Which, to be clear, like, is more or less the policy of the RBA, right? Like, if we're like,
Flo literally said that.
real talk, like that is what, and this is probably why we've talked about it on the show, like how sort of morally reprehensible our current system is, where it's just like, oh, you know, there's too much money in the economy, and the way we're going to drain that out is basically increase rates, you know, cause a recession, get a bunch of people to lose their jobs, and then that'll sort of take down to the demand side of the equation will be reduced as a result. So that is kind of like, he is just, to a certain extent there, he is just like reciting RBA policy, which, I mean, take that for what you will. But like the fact remains, though, that there is a certain disdain that comes through in this for the underclass, for the people that provide the value in the organizations that he's talking about, like saying that no one wants to work anymore is just like the most rich white guy thing to have ever been said on a stage at the Fin Review. Like, it's just like it fundamentally misunderstands the problem that is happening in the modern economy after COVID. It's not that like productivity is an issue, but like productivity gains in the next, 10 years are likely to come, and only in the order of like an extra % per year, but like are likely to come from things like the addition of AI into the workforce. Like, these are the things that gain productivity are not just like, people don't want to work hard nowadays, just a bunch of lazy fuckers. Like, that doesn't create additional productivity. Additional productivity comes from additional productive capacity, like a highly skilled workforce that is trained up to meet the demands of the skills that are required in the future.
Capital, basically.
Second.
Systems and capital, basically.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with the individual laziness of George, who's like working from home and knocks off at 4, or like that's like, that's not, this is for illustrative purposes only. This is not a real example, but
yes. No, please. I work myself to the bone. I work 24 hours a day. Please, God.
Please, economics daddy, please don't hurt me. I've got a child.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just insane. Like, yeah, you're right. It's disdain. Like the disdain.
The disdain for the underclass is what is so palpable.
Yeah, the disdain that the people who work for your business don't want to be working for your business for 100% of their waking minutes is like just disgusting. Like,
what happened? Do you remember when everyone was talking? Do you remember when everyone was talking about stakeholder capitalism a couple of years ago, sort of like just pre-pandemic? They were like, we need a new model of capitalism that's going to be better than shareholder capitalism. It's going to encompass environmental, social, governance, like capitalism that works for the working man, right? And then COVID happened, and they're just like, environmental what? Huh? Sorry, I was busy doing stock buy. I couldn't hear you over the sound of me doing billions of dollars worth of stock buybacks. What was that? What were you saying there? I missed that.
Yeah, and I love that. Just like post-COVID, no one wants to work anymore. It's like people like lost their jobs en masse due to COVID. That's not like people aren't working because people aren't not working because they don't want to be working. Also, just the whole fucking world changed in the blink of an eye.
We are seeing
there's so much about this that's wrong.
The idea that he's saying unemployment needs to rise by 40 to 50%, that's predicated on an idea called the Phillips curve. And we've got this linked in. If you're an economics nerd or you get off on these conversations, then we've got a link in the show notes about this from the RBA. But the Phillips curve is essentially the relationship between unemployment, between prices and wages, right? So if the unemployment
prices of goods and stuff.
Yes. So the inflation of goods and services in the economy and the unemployment rate. And for those who are viewing on the stream, there is a relationship between the two. Obviously, if unemployment skyrockets, then that's going to have an impact on inflation. And that really is the model that whether the RBA and other economics providers work on. So on this graph that we're looking at here, obviously you won't be able to hear this in the audio. It's sort of like two different hockey sticks. You got prices that go down and to the right, and then you've got wages that go down and to the right. Obviously, as the unemployment rate increases, then those prices start to come down. And there's sort of a sweet spot around that 4.5%, 5% unemployment rate where wages and prices overlap. And that's the sort of zero inflation
ideal
that we're sort of shooting towards. Obviously, the long-term trajectory is that we want to have inflation between that 2 to 3% range. So ideally, in that sort of 3 to 4% unemployment rate. Now, that's great if those are the only two variables occurring in your economy. If somehow you've got a completely closed system where the only two factors, there's no foreign investment, there's no forex trading, there's no cryptocurrency, there's no, nothing else happening. There's no
global pandemic,
for example. There's no restarting Chinese economy that was like less good than people thought it was going to be. As long as you take out all of the factors that make up the economy and you just leave only these two variables, that's a really great way of looking at the problem, right? There's a relationship between unemployment and inflation. But the fact is that the inflation that we're looking at the moment over the last couple of years post-COVID or since COVID has started have not been related to the unemployment rate. Like the unemployment rate has been ticking down, but wages, the wage price spiral that everyone was worried about, it's the 70s all over again. It's going to be wages. It's going to be prices. The prices are going to go up. Wages are going to increase tenfold. And then the prices are going to go up again because everyone's got all this extra money. It's like none of that's materialized. Like inflation's been sort of ticking over 6 and 7%. Wage growth has been like 3.7%. So clearly the inflation that we're seeing is not as a result of increased wages, right? It's not that everyone's got additional money in their pocket. In fact, there's a cost of living crisis. Everyone seems to be doing it really tough because there's not enough money. And the money that I had is now worth less than it was the year before. In fact, I've got less money and that's a problem. So there's been these bullwhips all across the economy everywhere since COVID started due to, COVID, supply chain shocks, the war in Ukraine having an impact on oil and natural gas prices, and all of those reverberations send shockwaves throughout the economy. And that's what people believe is causing the inflation, not the fact that unemployment should be 4%. It is whatever it is, 3%, and it should be 4.5%. Like it just goes to show that people like Tim Gurner just fundamentally misunderstand.
Hey, George, are you telling me that a guy, like a frat bro property developer if you're developing property, your sole profit or your business model is basically to
buy for one, sell for two,
buy and sell for two,
yeah.
Which is piggybacking on an explosive property bubble that has been persisting for the last 10 years and actually increases economic disadvantage in Western society. You're saying that a guy who capitalizes on that doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to the broader complexities of the economy? I
legitimately think that, I don't know what the number is, but I think having a certain amount of money actually like roasts your brain. I don't know what the number.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, is it like $10 million? Is it $100 million? There's a point where your brain is just like becomes so baked in like terminally online right-wing conservative discourse. As a result of being rich, you're like, I've got mine and I've got to protect it. And it's all the communists that are coming to get it from me. There's a certain number. I don't know what the number is, but you hit it and you immediately start turning into like, who's right now woke? what was that thing that Jordan B. Peterson said?
Up yours, woke moralists.
Up yours, woke moralists. Yeah, you just at $99 million, you're just like, yeah, look, I could see the advantages of a universal basic income. Like, there's pros, there's cons. Let's talk about it more. And then you like hit $100 million and you get activated like the Manchurian Candidate. You're just like, must kill proletariat. You just start marching out of the room.
The other thing this concept of inflation we keep talking about is it doesn't take into account this paradox that the wage thing is that, in a lot of cases, businesses have just been pricing in these wage. Everyone's been saying inflation's coming. So a lot of this stuff was just priced in. And then you have companies
there's
like
reporting
Qantas,
on that. We know that there have been reports.
Woolworths and Coles making record profits.
Yes.
Because they were all like, oh, we expect that, things are going to cost more. Oh, wait, they didn't cost as much as we thought they did. We made a massive profit.
Whoops.
Oops.
Yeah, no, there's been reporting that
inflation's coming from.
There's been reporting from Bloomberg, which talks about this, where they're saying like the more reporting that there is on inflation and cost of living pressures and supply chain shocks and things like that, the more individual brands, even if they're unaffected by those supply chain shocks, will use that as an opportunity to turn around and justify price increases. Like they will use that price over volume strategy, even if those supply chain shocks are not affecting them. Like this is just a market greed gouging thing, and it's got nothing to do with people's productive capacity. It's got like the point he makes about productivity is correct. Like productivity is not where we would like it to be in order to have a growing economy. But I think there's a lot of disagreement in the literature as to why that is. Like some economists will say like, well, we just had a bit of a bubble that we're coming off the back of in the 90s and 2000s around computer usage, around email, around, Slack and cloud tools. But we're kind of like tapering off that boom now. And what's left is kind of like a bit of stagnation in terms of productivity. Like the me of today is not going to be substantially more productive than the me of 3 years ago, because the tools, as a knowledge worker who sits down as a computer and writes bids and tenders and, does business development activity, my job looks more or less the same today as it did 3 years ago, as it did 3 years before that. So that is more fundamentally tied into what's happening with productivity. But again, that productivity gains and increases are not really related to the dynamic as to what's causing inflation at the moment. So it's just like he's just kind of like mushing a bunch of rich white guy. Nobody wants to work nowadays. And people go, yeah, that sounds right. I had trouble hiring on poverty wages. No one wanted to work for my poverty wages anymore. And it's because millennials are too entitled. That's what I heard down at...
They aren't grateful enough is sort of seems to be the thing there. Like that other comment that he said of like that... that the workers believe that the employer is lucky to have them when it should be the other way round or whatever. It should
be.
This horrific, this is the attitude of the people sending, the children into the chimney sweep mines or whatever in the Victorian era.
Yeah, it's so grotesque and just utterly disconnected from the reality of everyday people and their lives and the suffering that's created when someone loses it's just like, oh yeah, we just got to shed 140,000 jobs. Like we just got to, and it's like, okay, but like actually like think to step 2, Tim, as to like what that would actually mean for single income families, like who are barely scraping by. One partner's already lost a job. The other partner loses a job, puts their family in turmoil. They need to sell. Like there's no follow-up. There's no next step, like empathy as to like what happens to those people when they lose their jobs. And
I don't care.
He doesn't give a fuck because he's still going to be rich.
and they're not working for him anymore. So they don't exist in his head.
I don't know.
They're gone.
Why we keep talking about Tim Gurner. In 2017, he was the guy that on 60 Minutes made the comment that Australians can't afford to buy property because they're wasting their money on avocado toast and overpriced coffee. It's the same guy. So,
I thought that was Bernard Salt.
Bernard Salt might have written an article on it too, but Adam's right. He did say a similar sentiment on 60 Minutes.
Whether he came up with the idea or just recycled it, I don't give a shit. But his sentiments, did fire up people overseas. It wasn't just an Australian ecosystem that we're living in here. So Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, and I think George said Bernie Sanders as well, who are obviously in the US, they weren't very happy about it. And there were various rants on, or not rants, but sort of statements put out on Twitter/X after that video emerged. So, these sort of comments, I guess, once you sort of get viral, they do sort of move around the ecosystem.
But I think they've gone viral because they resonate with a lot of people and their experience of the class divide, where you've got these ultra rich people that are completely disconnected from the real world, from real people's lives, turning around and blaming society's ills on the people who have the least. Where I saw this amazing graph from this guy on TikTok, and he's like, I want to visually represent for you how much money the top 1% makes. And you see, gradations, the top sort of 20%, the top 30%, it's sort of going up to the top 1%. And you're like, okay, it looks kind of like a curve. It's going upwards. Like, it makes more sense if you're part of the top 1%, top 10%. You're probably making, the vast majority of the income in society. And he goes, let me show you what the graph looks like when I add the top 1%. And it was just like the aspect ratio just changed. If it was a graphic, it would have been that thing shooting through the fucking roof. Like, the vast, vast, vast majority of the things that are owned in this economy are owned by the 1%. And it really goes to show how stooged everyone else is becoming. And there's been this sort of awakening in the labor movement in the, sort of last couple of years as a result of COVID, and where people are recognizing, hey, not to get all C's the means of production on the podcast, but hey, we are the means of production. Okay. We are the workers who are creating the value that you're capitalizing off, and we deserve a larger share of that value. You've got the writer's strike, the actor strike over in the United States. There's an auto workers strike.
Yeah, automotive stuff's happening.
That's happening as well. Because people are turning around, they're looking at these massive multi-billion-dollar profits and going, hang on, you just said to me fucking 3 weeks ago that you couldn't afford to give me a pay rise, and yet we've just acquired a company that's worth $20 million. Like, what? Obviously, we had money for that. Like, obviously, we had money for the shareholders. We had money for buybacks. But all of it, when it comes down to putting more money in my pocket now, when I need it, all of a sudden it's, so sorry, there's no money in the, the piggy bank's empty. And we know that's bullshit now because we're seeing the numbers. So
it's cartoon villainy at this point. Like, maybe I just wasn't as switched on for many, many years, but it always seemed like, oh, it's bullshit, but there's like at least ways that they're obfuscating the obvious now, that they just absolutely loathe poor people.
That's what it feels like.
But it's now just cartoonishly obvious. Like,
it feels like they hate us.
Tim Gurner should be just chucking a top hat on top of that enormous forehead to hide it and calling himself Scrooge.
Yeah.
Like,
it's literally like robber baron level bullshit, where it's like, I mean, God, we're talking about robber barons, the train barons in the 1800s. And, we've still got that exact same dynamic playing out with like Norfolk Southern and the big train crash that happened there, where they're like, the workers like, please, can we have a sick day? And they're like, fuck you, you're dirt. We're going to crush you. It's like, we just want a single, please, sir, I want some more. Just a single bowl of porridge, my lord. Yeah. And they're like, fuck you. Yeah. We're going to make AI drive the trains.
Yeah, maybe one slight extra shred of dignity would be nice. And they're like, no.
What's the article here, Tom, with, because obviously Tim Gurner has made these comments, but he is the owner of a business, several businesses, I'm assuming. What's the clarification that's had to come out?
Well, a little clarification came out. Like, obviously, he's also tried to make clarifications on this by saying, like, oh, I regret my comments and blah, 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 blah. But, shut up, Tim.
Not nearly enough, Tim.
People work for Tim Gurner. In particular, there's one of his wellness businesses. It's called Saint Haven. And it's come out that a memo was sent to employees of that business, because probably following these comments, people were a bit concerned that their CEO was calling for pain and unemployment.
Saying that they were lazy fuckabouts.
A manager sent a memo around just reassuring them, being like, he wasn't, like, I'm paraphrasing here, oh, he didn't mean you guys. No, you guys are great. You guys are the best employees that anyone has ever had, ever. He meant other people.
Who could he be talking about? Who else but his own employees? Obviously, this is an interaction that he feels as though he's having with his employees. That's why he's mentioning it on stage into a microphone. The offensive part isn't that he said something that which we didn't already know. The offensive part is that he said the quiet part out loud. He said the thing that we knew that we suspected the rich thought about us, is that they hate us and we could just fucking die for their profits. Like, we could just send wave after wave of my own men for my corporate profits. Like, He just said the thing that we always suspected to be true, and he just said it out loud like it was fact. And everyone was like, wait a minute, that's fucked.
So in this memo that was sent around to staff, it said things like, quote, I want to start by saying I've had the pleasure of working with Tim for almost 2 years now and can hand on heart say that his care and love for the St. Haven team is immense. And then went on to talk about inflation rates. Like they actually gave the inflation explanation in this staff memo, which has been like, that's odd. Talking about, let's look at countries like Turkey and Greece and parts of South America to understand how significant inflation increases and housing shortages have real impacts on society, etc.
Man, those people must be really lazy. Their inflation was like 40 to 50%. Imagine how lazy they must be. Those fucking lazy Greeks and Turks.
But then this flip on what he said I thought was quite amazing, which is that, quote, many Australian business leaders are fighting very hard, Tim included, to ensure Australia really remains the lucky country by speaking about the importance of increasing productivity in the economy and increasing housing supply. So not only are
not
they
all
saying,
heroes wear capes.
He didn't mean you guys, but him going out there and saying the quiet part loud that you're all scum who don't want to work and are pieces of shit who can die for his profits is doing you a favor. He's
say, can you see by the dawn's early light? Some people have used the word hero. I wouldn't say that myself.
It's a good thing that he thinks you're scum. It's a good thing. Oh, it's just mind-boggling. Like, he can take his enormous forehead and fuck off. I don't know if you guys enjoyed that thing I sent you on Twitter, and people should look it up if they are feeling inclined. But someone just said, like, for every 20 likes on my tweet, I will make his forehead bigger with Photoshop. And it's very subtle each time where you're like, nah, that's the original picture. And it's just getting cartoonishly large. I think until someone replaced one of the World Trade Centers with this really long, like, extension of his head, where I was like, that's poor taste, but it's funny. Anyway, get fucked, Tim.
Yes, get fucked, Tim. And Qantas also got fucked this week.
They did. Mm-hmm.
I guess this is probably where the system works to an extent in Australia, where we have some sort of check and balance to rampant corporate dealings. So obviously Qantas had the week from hell last week. This is kind of the tail end of that week from hell.
Still experiencing some turbulence and tailwinds.
Exactly. So after the whole, we've got a new CEO. We're getting investigated by the ACCC. We got a $2.5 billion profit, and we went to great lengths last week to talk about how Qantas had fired all their ground staff and replaced them with contractors and all this kind of stuff. We talked about that last week. It turns out that they'd actually been to the federal court about this. There was a union, action in the federal court where Qantas were found to have illegally sacked those 1,700 ground crew staff. And then Qantas appealed it once, and then they decided to appeal it again by taking it to the High Court, where they asked the High Court to judge more of a nuanced opinion about sort of how to, the reasons for firing these staff. And then the High Court went, fuck you. No, the federal court was right in the first instance, and Qantas have now been sent scurrying for cover and have issued an apology.
They did ask about some of those. It was like, no, obviously, you're not going to get the ruling in this case, but as a judge, could I also get an invite to that chairman's lounge? Like, what's the go with? It's like a high court judge, obviously, like pretty important. Like not a federal politician, but like
I'm sick of making my own toasties.
Like a pleb like an idiot pleb. It has been determined that it was illegal, and this opens the door to some sort of financial payout that is yet to be negotiated. But yeah, when everyone was saying during the pandemic, like, oh, Alan Joyce is just being a shrewd businessman by laying off all the baggage handlers, where's my apology? Where's my apology? Because I was out here saying, hey, this is fucked, and it seems like it would be illegal. And then years later, the High Court goes, oh, yeah, that was pretty fucked. Do you want your jobs back? And everyone's like, it's been years? That
Yeah.
doesn't help me at all. My life was ruined years ago, and I've had to put it back together since then. I don't want to go back and work for Qantas now. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I haven't been sitting here not doing anything for 3 years, waiting for my job to come
Awaiting
back.
instructions.
Yeah. But, yeah, I agree with Adam. Like, a rare instance of the system works.
No, what happened is the system got shamed because a bunch of journalists wrote articles and
True.
embarrassed a bunch of federal politicians about the closeness of their relationship with Qantas. And then there happened to be a court case determination shortly thereafter. I don't know that any of this would have really come to light if it wasn't for the reporting that's
Really?
been happening.
That would have
Transport
influenced
Workers
the High
Union.
Court. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Decision?
I don't think they would have gotten the verdict that they just got if it hadn't been plastered all over the news for weeks. I don't think it's a coincidence.
Maybe not. That would tie judges' opinions to the tide of public sentiment, George.
Yeah, that would be
certainly they don't do anything like that. That's never occurred.
Geez. That'd be an insane breach of the separation of judicial and executive and all that sort of stuff. Yeah,
So next
I'm
up
trying
is...
to... Oh, sorry, Adam.
No, you go. What are you trying to do?
Oh, no, I was trying to find something just that I saw as a cheeky note this past week about Alan Joyce's departure from Qantas, which was just that he I saw that, but I can't find anyone in the news talking about it. So maybe it was someone having a laugh, but it was something about him like that he left the country to go back to Ireland like the day before the resignation news came in, or like, you know, just before the swap was meant to happen, and that someone clocked that he flew Qatar. It was just a funny little thing, but yeah, maybe I can't find an exact detail on it, but it's a funny thought anyway.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Clears the way for compensation now to take place. As to what that looks like, we're not sure. Interestingly enough, the new Qantas CEO's signature or name wasn't on the apology to the affected workers. So I guess that's an optics thing, shall we say, despite the fact that, I mean, she was CFO when all this was going down, so I don't...
we're going to keep appealing it. We're going to keep appealing it. Yeah, we're going to appeal it again. Yeah, we're going to appeal it again. Well, Qantas will fight with tooth and net. We lost. We are deeply sorry for the hurt that we may have caused.
Sorry.
Deeply, genuinely concerned from the bottom of our... Now that we can no longer escape via legal wrangling, we are deeply sorry for the hurt that we have been found to have caused.
Yeah, so that's good. It's it's nice. Another good thing that happened this week was the Housing Australia Future Fund finally passed the Senate.
Yay.
The Greens finally, came to a deal. They didn't get the rent freeze that they were after. Max Chandler, what's his name? Max Chandler May wasn't. Was still saying that they're going to fight for it. But what the Greens did manage to do is secure effectively an extra $3 billion that wasn't there in the first package that came through. So that extra money, I guess, will be given to the states to build houses up front, and then the rest of the money will go into the kitty to be invested into future builds. So they're going to be targeting, as per the coalition policy, 30,000 new and affordable social homes built in the first 5 years. I personally, as someone who works in construction, don't know how that's going to happen with the resources the sector currently has.
Well, it's just gonna make those construction workers even lazier. Even lazier than they were before. Tim Gurner's going to have an aneurysm. What's going to happen? If all this extra money's flowing in, they're going to get lazier and lazier.
Extra money, and it'll be interesting to sort of see how quickly those things can get up, and also how it will tie in with state, planning laws and council planning laws, and how all that will work. I don't know, and it's not quite clear, but at least the money is there, and it's now going to be incumbent upon the states to effectively make that happen.
Yeah, I imagine the bureaucracy around all this is going to be insane. Like when people are doing planning permits or anything like that, just for regular renovations or builds, it's something of
it's insane. A clusterfuck. And councils, some councils are under resourced in growth areas. Like some of these councils are struggling. Like you try to get someone at Melton Council to pass a report and consent at the moment, and it's a struggle. So I'm sure there'll be resources thrown into various sectors, and as time goes on, some of the labour issues in the economy will start to in the construction sector in particular, will start to hopefully even out as migration goes up. But
There's also
I will be very interested to see how it all shakes out.
There's also incentives from the government for like free TAFE courses. Some of those are in like nursing and other sort of in need industries, but there are free TAFE places for construction and housing and residential property development as well. So hopefully training up some domestic labor when that starts coming online as well, then you're going to have more sort of supply that's going to help deal with all this extra demand. But these are big projects and they take time. Like truthfully, we should have been onto this 15, 20 years ago.
Yes. Yeah, like many things that the current government are doing. It's like this is what should have happened like 20 years ago. Like, when people are talking about why are you approving new coal and gas projects? And it's like, well, it takes time for us to wean off them. It's like, yeah, we should have been doing that ages ago, but now we don't have the time.
That's why I was telling you.
Poisoned the world to some extent, sort of 15 to 20 years ago, 30 years
Neoliberalism.
ago. Yeah.
Woohoo!
I mean, look, it is a large cost outlay, but it's good that the federal government does sort of stump those funds up. For instance, Tasmania, their social housing boom, which sort of went through from the 50s to about the 70s, something like that. They only paid it off with help from the Commonwealth government, I think about 5-10 years. Like, it wasn't very long. It was like a couple of years ago, basically. So those kind of, bills do linger, but, with the federal support, I guess it makes it easier.
But that's the good thing about being a country is that you have the rest of the country's life in order to pay off those bills. Like, it's not like a household budget where it's like, I put $5,000 on my credit card and I got to pay $5,000 next month. It's like, no, a country will be here hopefully forever. And so you can make those longer term, bigger plans. You can accrue a little bit of debt if it's for the sake of growing the productive capacity of the economy. In this case, providing people with affordable housing, which I would argue is a human right, not like an investment vehicle, the way we've sort of treated it, at least during our lifetimes. But it's good. $10 billion is good. And for everyone who is sooky at the Greens going, why are the Greens blocking it? The bloody Greens just blocking it. We've got all these builders lined up for the TV cameras saying that they're ready to go and start building tomorrow.
You didn't say that. That was a...
look at him. We got Bob the Builder over here with his hammer. He's just sitting down on the ground. He was waiting for the bill to pass. He was an avid Parliament watcher and he was sitting there waiting for the bill to pass and it didn't pass today. It's all because of the bloody Greens. It turns out they got an extra $3 billion for public housing, which would definitely not have been forthcoming otherwise. So I think it's a win.
They were doing, I'd argue their job.
Yeah.
Their job is to hey, if we need to put the screws to the government to try and make the deal better.
That is that is literally the point of a crossbench, right? Is you need to negotiate in good faith to try and get your package through and try and get more people what they want, otherwise known as democracy.
Yeah, I knew so many people who were saying I think they're shooting themselves in the foot and all that sort of stuff. I can't believe they're doing this. I'm like, no, they're playing the game. That's what the game is. And they're doing it for once. Once, it's not the evil ones holding out.
It does almost look like the system worked to that extent. Like politics worked in that instance. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Labor had to come to the table. Yeah. And we're
going to do a double dissolution. They got a gun to their own head. Go, we'll fucking do it. We'll do it. And the Greens are just like, yeah, no, bro. You just give us some money for social housing. Can you do anything except appease billionaires for a moment? And Labor's going, I'll kill him. I'm fucking crazy. All right, fine. Here's $3 billion.
Speaking of fucking crazy, Putin has been moving overseas. Putin has been cozying up to one of the world leaders of this day and age. They're thought leaders. They're an economic powerhouse, I believe, is probably what you describe them as.
Did he meet with Tim Gurner?
Yeah, Tim Gurner. The Tim Gurner of North Korea. Putin has had a pretty much like a week-long summit almost now with Kim Jong-un from North Korea. So obviously previously North Korea have been on the shit list with Russia as well. Russia, basically sort of cut ties at the end of the Soviet Union with North Korea because that, doesn't, you kind of look a bit crazy if you're dealing with crazy people. And because of the war in Ukraine, ostensibly, Putin's running out of allies, and these now sort of, I guess, they're trying to align themselves with North Korea to try and get, what they're trying to say here is they're getting effectively weapons and ammunition
Shells.
from North Korea,
Yeah.
shells in particular, to help, ease the supply issues they've got with the war in Ukraine. In exchange, North Korea allegedly is just getting like food and farm equipment, although they've been touring a lot of missile factories.
Yeah. So that's publicly, that's what they're getting is some snacks. But
wrong kind of silo. You want a grain silo.
You idiots.
Grain silo,
not a missile silo, you idiots.
Not nuclear arms. You can't hug your children with nuclear arms.
Boris, what did I say? I told take us to the silos, you idiot. So there are rumors. There was a report in the New York Times this week that suggests that there is some sort of plan to share ballistic missile technology that the North Koreans don't already have with them in exchange for shells and other things that Russia might want to undertake this war, which is
it's
suboptimal.
It's a tricky thing because, one, it breaks all the non-nuclear proliferation treaties and stuff if they give them the technology.
Yeah, no, they're real proliferating if they go ahead and do this.
But I guess the other thing as well is that from Russia's perspective, they've got no real other options, but it is a massive gamble because, North Korea could be your friend today, but tomorrow, who knows what the fuck they're going to do.
Yeah,
These guys are insane.
That's the danger of giving the Hermit King access to ballistic missiles in addition to the nuclear weapons that they already have, is that he is extremely unstable. Like, this is not just a you problem that you're creating. You're creating a problem for potentially everyone by doing this.
North Korea allegedly have potentially been giving, there's been potentially weapons being transferred, through the black market into Ukraine already. This is more of a formalized announcement. At the end of the day, the big winner in this is North Korea. Kim Jong-un has been on the world stage. They rolled the red fucking carpet out for him when he visited Vladivostok. I can't say it properly. Vladivostok.
Yep.
And he just looks like the happiest guy in the world. Interestingly, he did do the right thing, which is he did not leave the ground either. He made sure he arrived on a train. If you're a hermit dictator,
he hasn't pissed off Putin yet, though. He has to.
No, but he
has
doesn't
to really piss off Putin, and then you can't gain altitude ever.
I wonder if anyone was sort of gaming out like, okay, we can tell this massive armored train is leaving North Korea. We suspect that Kim Jong-un is on it. Like, do we blow that shit up from space? Like, there was a discussion that was had around the table at the CIA being like, okay, I know we didn't really get anywhere with the exploding cigars thing, but this time I just think if we just drop a real big bomb on it, I think we're pretty solid on being able to assassinate this foreign leader in this instance, right?
Obviously I don't think they want to piss him off too much, but there'd be options.
Hard to piss him off if he's dead.
It'll be pissing off everyone else in North Korea. That'd be an issue.
Yeah.
There's got to think of the scouts in South Korea, George. You can't get too crazy. So it's kind of absurd that this is even a thing.
Not the meeting of minds that we want to see happen.
if you're Putin, is it just that he's doing it because he has to, or is he going, you know what? Has he sort of cognitively tricked himself into going, yeah, obviously this Kim Jong-un guy is such a great guy. I don't know why I didn't hang out with him sooner. Or does he know that he's making a deal with the devil and he's like, I'm happy to do it?
I think it's a heel turn. I think he likes that we fucking hate him. It's like with those wrestlers who are the bad guy in the WWF. And they're like, yeah, come at me. I'm a piece of shit. You guys hate the piece of shit, right? That's exactly, he's doing a heel turn. He's like, I know you'll hate me and I don't care. I'm going to hang out with the evilest guy I can find. Is Jeffrey Dahmer still around? No, he's dead. Okay, Kim Jong-un, you up?
It's crazy.
I would be frankly amazed at the idea that Jeffrey Dahmer is higher up the list than Kim Jong-un. Just what would Putin gain from just showing Jeffrey Dahmer around.
Boiling
sometimes.
head technology. I don't know. I just you don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, that's an insane fucking thing that happened this week. But it's and then he extended his stay. Did I mention that Kim Jong-un extended his stay in Russia because they wanted to, and extended an invite back as well. So that was fucking insane.
Oh yes, yeah, Putin. Go visit Pyongyang. that'll be interesting. Do you think he's crazy enough to do that for Putin to leave Russia?
Can you imagine, whatever? Well, I don't know if there's so much, North Korean tourism that happens now, but when North Korean tourism was sort of
it's a thing
happening about 10 years ago, when it was like there was a period there where they were like they keep going from sort of open to not being open, and there's like a weird sort of cyclical thing depending on what military drills are happening at any time on the Korean Peninsula. But
it's also a PR thing as well. They're trying to sort of showcase the best version of fake grocery stores and all this sort of stuff to like make North Korea look like it's a real country rather than just like a bunch of paper cutouts.
They literally do like movie sets, and they'll be like, let's go to a park and meet people.
A real normal park with a bunch of real normal people living in it. Like
it's like that.
Is YouTube stuff you watch this?
Like that jury duty show on Amazon or whatever. And just like, come to the park, but everyone's an actor.
Yeah.
All, Can
you imagine what would happen if Putin came to North Korea? It would just be like that times a billion. Like
just
everyone's
like choreographed like La La Land musical numbers in the park and just be like, this is fucking crazy. I can't believe this is what the North Koreans normally like. This is very cool. You guys, I have to say, well done.
I'm glad I left my comically long table to come here.
It's a very big table.
Speaking of, I don't know, insane things. I don't know if it's insane, but the next story is Jacinta Price.
Yep, back here in Australia.
She had the opportunity to speak at the National Press Club this week and said a bunch of things. Some of which were sort of correct, some of which weren't correct, and some of which were sort of insensitive.
That's the most charitable fucking way I've heard of describing this.
I haven't heard the full press conference. I've seen the headlines coming out of it, so I don't want to be too much of a judge. But yeah, she said some things that were like,
can I say I just love Adam's just insatiable need to give people the benefit of the doubt. So
he's a glass half full.
Glass is incredibly full. So during the speech, Jacinta Price criticized Indigenous bodies. So this is in relation to the Voice referendum, which is coming up in October.
And Jacinta Price is the shadow Indigenous minister.
And one of the chief sort of proponents of the No campaign and big duffel bag of shit.
Is Napinja her middle name? Is that her middle name, or is that
I don't think that might have been Napin. No, why would you make me do this? Napi Jinpa Price. I think Price is her married name. I could be wrong about that. And her maiden name was Napin.
I've always assumed it was her middle name, but I don't know whether it's everyone's just like pronouncing her name in full, or whether as you said, like it's like a hyphenated thing or whatever. But anyway,
Anyway,
for the context of this story, that's her full name, but we'll call it Jacinta Price to prevent the mispronunciations.
Guardian Australia asked Jacinta Price to clarify whether she thought any Indigenous people were suffering negative impacts of colonisation today, to which Price responded, no. A positive impact, absolutely. I mean, now we have running water, readily available food, she said, and that Indigenous bodies were sought to, quote, demonize colonial settlement in its entirety and nurture a national self-loathing about the foundations of modern Australian achievement, which is just breathtaking in either its stupidity or its, I don't know, in its cravenness. Like, either you are... And I don't see how this could possibly be the case, but you are completely ignorant of the suffering of Indigenous people and have never cracked a fucking book and never watched Rabbit Proof Fence. Like she was the deputy mayor of Alice Springs, right? So clearly that can't be the case, is that she's ignorant of the disadvantage that the Aboriginal community has relative to white Australians. she's obviously aware of the Closing the Gap report, which details that differential in pretty stark prose. So either those are the two choices. You're either unaware, which I don't think can be the case, or you're just lying. You're a liar, and you're happy to lie and say whatever it is needs to be said for the sake of advancing your own personal agenda, your own personal financial situation, your own personal power and prestige. Like, clearly her whole career looks to me like someone who was looking to say the thing that would get her fame and power. And she will say and do anything. She was a kids entertainer initially. That sort of worked. Then she tried a country music career. That didn't really work. Then she was deputy mayor of Alice Springs, and then found this whole kind of like right-wing Aboriginal sort of voice that she could use to sort of take money from organizations like Advance Australia and, sort of neoliberal, neoconservative organizations that are happy to have an Indigenous person as the face of it in order to advance her agenda. And with the No campaign, she's like, ironically, found her voice in terms of how she wants to be perceived by the Australian public. But it's like, I don't know how you could possibly, how you could be the person that you are, who's grown up in the situation that you've grown up in, and how you could genuinely hold the views that you seem to have about what modern Australia is and how it treats Indigenous people.
Yeah, that sentence of no, there is no ongoing negative impacts of colonization.
Obviously false. Obviously, it boggles the mind.
Yeah, it's absolutely it just boggles the mind, because regardless of how of her stance on adding the voice to Parliament to the Constitution and her arguments for or against and all that sort of stuff, that To say that there's no
it's provably false.
Effects of colonization,
it is a lie. It is an obvious, bold-faced lie.
It's crazy, and it has nothing to do with the voice per se itself. You could, I don't get that. I can get how she can be campaigning for the No campaign. I don't get how she could hold that belief.
I do wonder whether or not, there is this sort of. That is an argument that is put out there by certain sectors of the community, where they say, well, they are better off after colonisation because they have running water education.
Yeah, that's an extremely racist point of view. I expect that out of Tony Abbott. I don't expect that out of an Indigenous person who's had contact with other Indigenous people and those circumstances that have been created as a direct result of colonisation. That just seems crazy to me.
Is that it takes the view that all other things are equal. Which they're not.
Which they're obviously not.
Because, when we talk about colonisation, we're not just referring to Arthur Phillip, planting a flag in 1788. We're talking about, the various institutions.
Stolen generations. The institutions of intergenerational violence that have been visited upon Indigenous. Crack a book, Jacinta.
That's what we mean by colonisation. So
it's the system that's been created.
Yes, they have access to lots of opportunities because of advancement in society, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the trauma that has filtered down the line into intergenerational poverty and trauma and other things for certain sectors of the Indigenous community, that those things haven't occurred. So
think about how much running water and opportunities they would have if the British didn't murder and enslave them.
It's
probably a lot.
Probably better.
It's funny because I know personally that there are members of my own family that are they really do listen to Jacinta Price, and they see her as Indigenous and being an authentic voice on the subject.
Only insofar as she reflects their own bigoted views back at them.
Well, I think I don't necessarily know why, but it is interesting just to see, as you said, that she has positioned herself with these she's a member of the Nationals Party, as far as I'm aware. She has positioned herself on the right-wing ecosystem. And whether or not it's it is just that she's, I don't know, she's just happy to say whatever she needs to say to advance her own position, or whether it is, again, it's a cognitive dissonance where you bend your own thinking to suit the situation.
I can't imagine. I can't conceive of how. I have no theory of mind
Since this has happened,
her to actually genuinely believe these things. I can't understand how she would have got there. Like,
since this has happened, and since she got called out by everyone for saying this, this response to this question that she was asked, she herself has now, put out a statement saying, I'm being victimized, I'm being bullied, my husband's copying crap, and that's not fair, and then put a big statement out on Facebook. So
it's classic Jacinta Price
which is
fucking material.
She's saying that, a week ago, Linda Burney and some other people, I can't remember her name, she's a professor, but she's one of the people that helped author the Uluru statement. She was saying that she was being bullied. Everyone's saying they're being bullied and victimized as part of this debate. And I think, look, to be fair, sometimes we do take sound bites out and we go, but it's...
it's a pretty, that's... there's sound bites where you're like, oh, that was out of context. There was more to that discussion.
Yeah.
I've listened to the segment that this came from. There was not more to that discussion. Okay, let me tell you right now, this doesn't come from a deeper, more nuanced discussion about colonization and its impacts. She is regurgitating a conservative right-wing talking point that is happy to have her manifesting as the face of it because it lends credence to an idea that is objectively, provably incorrect. There is money that is happy to be behind her specifically saying these things because she is Indigenous.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, there is a sort of part of me that wonders, there's the whole white lackey sort of stereotype where, you put a blackface, someone to be the voice of a campaign and to make it look like it's authentic.
Oh, they've been doing that in the voice campaign with an AI generated Indigenous person. They've been literally going, oh, we'll put a fake Aboriginal person who doesn't even exist on the face of this campaign. So makes you think that the No campaign is represented by Indigenous people. But it's that guy doesn't even exist. He's not a real person. They couldn't find a real Indigenous person to get on board and say it. So they're like, well, make one up. It's crazy.
That wasn't an official. That was some crypto dude who made that. He's running his own campaign. Okay,
but you look at the ecosystem that then magnifies it and pushes it and distributes it and propagates it. It's all this Advance Australia right-wing conservative, Pauline Hanson. They're all part of the same fucking right-wing echo chamber nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, if your cookies and your algorithm was showing Advance Australia No campaign stuff, then the other stuff that's by whatever his name is, Private Citizen Man over here is probably going to filter in.
But it's not an accident. That the way you're saying it makes it sound like it's accidental. But what I'm saying is that it's a deliberate campaign. You see on Twitter all of these fucking eggs. Whenever someone posts about The Voice, it's just a bunch of fucking 12 character, FKRJQ72 on Twitter.
John, lots of numbers.
Bobby Eggs on Twitter saying, that he agrees with the No side. It is a coordinated misinformation campaign that has money behind it.
And look, the same thing was happening during COVID for certain aspects of
the last election and all that sort of stuff.
And that's I guess the information space that we live in today.
That's the digital age democracy right there, right?
I'm deliberately trying to watch some of this No stuff to sort of understand a bit better about why and how they're coming to some of these positions.
If you don't know, vote no. But if you don't know, maintain the status quo that enhances your ignorance. Don't bother to find out. Don't bother to venture and learn new information and perhaps broaden yourself and learn new things about the way the world works. No. Remain still in your ignorance. Take the blue pill. Go back to sleep. If you don't know, vote no. Stay a fucking idiot.
Well, interestingly, a lot of it's kind of like our podcast, a lot of people sharing stuff. The stuff that is shareable is people's opinions. It's not news. It's Sky News opinion pieces. It's editorials in various newspapers. It's podcasts like us. It's YouTube videos. It's bloody the South Australian former radio presenter who got dumped because he said something nasty about Fuck, my brain's not working. Beast, anyway, you got fired. So like there are basically various, the things that are shareable are not based in fact. They're opinion pieces. And that gets cycled through the echo chamber and people saying, look, listen to this voice, listen to this person's opinion, listen to this. But like, once you do that, so many repetitions, like after so many repetitions, it sort of becomes all nonsense gobbledygook. So what I would encourage people to do is
the zone with shit. All right.
Yeah.
That was what Steve Bannon said. You don't have to win the issue. You just need to pump enough shit into the discourse so the shit is indecipherable from the real information. That has always been the strategy, right? It's exactly, and it's the same people pushing the same strategy. As Trump
and fear. It's based around fear. It's a fear of I'm going to be disadvantaged somehow by this no referendum, or it'll create a change, or it'll create some high court challenge that's going to somehow destabilize society. It's going to racially divide us. Like, these are very provocative terms that create fear. But if you look just simply at the proposed amendment, if you go to voice.gov.au and look at it, and if you listen to the Solicitor General's advice, if you like the likelihood, like some of these things aren't necessarily possible. Like there could be high court challenges potentially if like the voice wasn't given the chance to make a representation, but it doesn't give them a veto power. A high court challenge isn't like going to fucking Woolies and picking milk off the shelf. A high court challenge is a very expensive and time-consuming process. Like, they're not going to be coming down like the rain.
But the thing is,
it's non-binding.
If you're living in a society
which are completely like unlikely. They might be like slightly likely, but they're unlikely. But the fear of that unlikelihood is capitalized on, to a great extent, by the No campaign.
100%. No. You're absolutely right. I'm glad you got that out because yes, I wholeheartedly agree. Like the idea though that if you've lived in a society where the white point of view is the point of view that's normalized, right? That's representative. Any change to the way that our constitution is structured to those people, and I'm going to say racists because like I really don't know what else to call them at this point. It's just like people are like if you've been oppressing another group of people based on their race for hundreds, thousands of years, any change in the power balance that even makes it seem as though power is being transferred from the ruling class down to the minority class is going to seem like it's some massive injustice, right? And it is being deliberately played up for that effect. But like, it really is just a case of like white Australia still being pretty fucking racist and feeling as though if they take the foot off the necks, their foot off the necks of minorities, that there's going to be some sort of like race war reckoning where it's like Indigenous communities like, can we have a seat at the table? And they're like, oh, you see what this means? Upcoming race war. See, this is what I was telling you guys. Yeah. It was the same dynamic with slavery in the United States. Okay, if we free the slaves, well, they're just going to turn around and kill us because that's what I'd do if I was oppressing me for 250 years. And the slave's like, bro, I just want to be free. Like, I just want equality. Like, I want freedom. I'm not after revenge. And the white people are like, but I'd want revenge, so you're going to stay a slave. Like the same thing with the serfs over in Russia. Like, we've got to keep them enslaved because if we free them, they're going to kill us all because that's what I would do if someone was doing that to me. It's like they can never get out of their own headspace enough to actually understand that it's not about you. It's about giving some sort of representation to the minority and making them feel as though they are part of a society that values their voice, that cares about them, and that wants to give them a seat at the table, not because it's ours to give or not, like I don't want to get into any of those like white savior dynamics, but like because we live in a society and all people in a society deserve a seat at the table, and recognizing that a particular group has been particularly deliberately underprivileged for several hundred years is not like cultural Marxism. It's just like what a fair and rational and just society would do is to show compassion to those who have been least fortunate, especially when that lack of fortune has been exercised on them deliberately, systemically by the people in power. Like it it really is as simple as that. Like we want to have an equal society where all voices are represented, and we want to emphasize the voices of the most downtrodden. Simple as that.
There are some groups that say, well, yeah, look, to this argument, I don't necessarily. I think, if this is the principle you want to stand on, like, I'm not going to hold you. I'm not going to go after you for it. But like the whole concept of, why does one group get a constitutional recognition whereas others don't? I mean, the answer to that obviously is that it is.
We spent 250 years fucking them into the dirt, maybe.
And
maybe that's why.
For me, it would be I don't trust a future Conservative government to not get rid of whatever committee we legislate.
Like, happened. I mean, just literally, like there used to be the predecessor to the NIAA, which is the National Indigenous. I can't remember what it stands for. It's the Indigenous peak body, right? That's there at the moment. The predecessor to that was a legislated body which had elected members, where Indigenous people did get to have their say. That was exactly what Dutton's been calling for. It's a legislative body, right? That was wrapped up after 15 years by the Howard government with the support of Mark Latham, interestingly enough, because it was seen to be inefficient and not really, providing with dividends. But
because they don't give a fuck about Indigenous people, because they don't actually care, right? So the only way you're going to get people to care is if it's not just legislated, but if it's enshrined in the Constitution where you have to care. You have to have representation to Parliament, and it has to be considered, because as soon as you get, God forbid, the 2030 Pauline Hanson government.
Oh, don't even joke about
with
that.
With Mark Latham as the deputy.
Oh man, I just threw up in my mouth a little.
That is the different regimes are going to have completely different priorities, and things like this will get pushed aside if they are not enshrined in a deeper way than just ordinary legislation.
Yeah. And look, there are some people that are really afraid of the fact that, there is a call, that this is conceptually, this is the first step towards a treaty, right? There are some people that are really afraid of that and think that somehow the government's hiding the fact that there's a treaty as being an end aspirational thing.
It's in the Uluru Statement from the Heart.
It's not Makarrata means treaty. They're not hiding it. It's not a conspiracy, guys. It's there, been there all along. But a treaty doesn't necessarily mean like it's Zimbabwe, Rhodesia 2.0. They're not going to come and take your farm. Like it's just a way of reaching an agreement or some sort of equalization.
How can we ever have a situation where there's truth and reconciliation if we can't even achieve the most basic part of that, which is to
listen to them?
Like it really makes me pretty despondent for the state of our politics. And maybe they didn't have the pieces in place in the first place to do a referendum in the digital age, in the digital age of politics, as you were saying, Tom. Yeah. Like we needed a truth in advertising model. We needed, some sort of way of preventing the spread of misinformation. Like I feel like there are a couple of steps in there that we probably should have taken first before. Like you can't just put lies in the AEC pamphlet, like for a start. Like maybe we didn't do the groundwork. We knew this was all foreseeable and pretty preventable. I think there's all this world of misinformation that we're in currently. So for Labor to not have foreseen that and sort of mitigated against that, I think it's pretty disappointing. I think that's going to be the downfall of this referendum, because as it currently stands, it's 60-40 against roughly.
Yeah.
Down from the inverse of that 12 months ago. So given that we haven't done the groundwork, I don't see how the Yes campaign can really win it back at this stage. Like I think we've just fumbled the ball too much. The fact that there was like 10 months in between when they announced it and when the campaign started, which gave the No campaign a full financial year head start on being able to sort of rip the campaign to shreds and say that there wasn't enough information. And, people like Adam Doreen were like, no, I think Peter Dutton's really seriously considering throwing his weight behind the Yes campaign. I'm going, of course he's not, you fucking idiot. Of course he's going to be part of the No campaign. He's just stretching it out to get more news cycles out of it. And I was like, oh, no, we should give him the benefit of the doubt. I like the cut of his Peter Dutton's jib.
Anyway, so yeah.
The point was we were not set up for success, right? No. And I think if the referendum fails, and it does look likely to fail, it will be as a result of those factors. We just did not do the groundwork in advance to make sure that we had an environment that was conducive to a national conversation around race. We just didn't do the work. And here's the result.
Yeah. I think Albanese may have just sort of thought, well, I've got a mandate. I won the election by a healthy margin and everyone loves me and away I go. But it's not as simple as that.
Which would have been great if you did it day one and like launched the campaign straight away. And that was like first order of business or whatever. But he mentioned it. It was the first thing in his speech. They announced that they're doing it, and then it's just crickets. And they just completely ceded the ground to the No campaign to say and do whatever the fuck they wanted to do for months, for half a year before the campaign started. Like, it was just very poorly thought out. Like, yeah, it's disappointing.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Hopefully everyone can stop sort of slagging on each other, so various Indigenous members of the community can stop all feeling like they're all being personally attacked. That would be nice.
It reminds me of the plebiscite, the gay marriage plebiscite. Where it's like, why is it, to a certain extent, why is it necessary for us to take a vote on the human rights of our fellow citizens?
Of other people.
Because that's naturally just in and of itself going to be something that is divisive. Like Peter Dutton talks about this divisive referendum and but it's only divisive because the Liberal Party is on the other side of it. They're like, this divisive rhetoric that's dividing the nation, dividing us based on race. So it's like, well, you're the ones that are opposing it. Like, if both major parties were on board with it, it wouldn't be divisive. Like, it would be not divisive if that was the case.
Given they have to alter the constitution to sort of be doing it, like that was sort of the extra angle of the same-sex marriage plebiscite, which was like, you guys could just do this.
Yeah, you could just do it at any point.
Like having a campaign where then there's a vote that was just to give you an opinion, not a non-binding thing. You have just invited this debate and voting on the human rights of other people when you could have just done what you eventually did anyway in it. Whilst in this instance, and while they could just legislate a body like they did previously and then wrapped up, this is the reason we're taking it to this point, because then you can't just wrap it up because you're racist pieces of shit. They still have to exist.
I guess when I say it reminds me of the plebiscite, it's
I know exactly
more just the fact that it's like now part of the discourse that we're debating the human rights of our fellow citizens. It's just like, I don't like this dynamic. This is not a great place for us to be, especially to be on the losing side of as well. It just does not make me feel good about the state of our politics.
Yeah, well, 4 weeks out, fingers crossed, the right thing happens. But
it didn't.
Isn't that a fun note to end on? How long have we been going?
You want to talk about the right thing in Spain, or should we leave that for another?
We can talk about it. We'll just be quick. It's been an hour and 12, so we'll wrap it up pretty quick. But a fun one.
Terrible.
Let's end on a fun one. No jokes. So there has been outrage in Spain this week after a man has apparently groped a Spanish journalist as she was making an address live on air. So, I mean, I could play the video, but it doesn't really, it's in Spanish because so it's not really going to make much sense to you unless you...
Anyone listening who can speak or understand Spanish would appreciate it, but you won't get subtitles or any of that sort of stuff.
It's in the show notes, but basically this journalist Isa Balado, who's a journalist with the broadcaster Curato, was delving into details of a robbery that occurred in Madrid last week, and she was approached by a man from behind. He sort of sees her and then kind of like comes up to her, kind of like gives her a little pat on the bum, and is asking her what what station they're on. And the anchor's like, what the fuck did that guy just... She just kind of like pushes him off and that goes to the professionalism of this woman, by the way. Not that she should need to just like take a sexual assault live on air and keep rolling for the cameras, but like she does. And then the news anchor was like, hey, did that guy just touch your bum? Like what the fuck just happened there? And she's like,
yeah, he did.
And then this guy's still sort of on camera. The camera sort of pans and he's still there.
Sort of standing there.
Kind of like standing there, kind of like, I don't know, like sort of menacing this woman, basically, sort of asking her what TV station she's working for, like trying to hit on her sort of thing. And it's sparked off this huge sort of social media, like Me Too-esque type movement in Spain with the hashtag Se acabó, which means it's over. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but I did it with conviction. But yeah, it's been a whole sort of explosive story in Spain, and especially coming off the story in Spain where the guy from the World Cup, what was that guy's name?
Soccer president.
It's the Spanish, soccer president. Where he effectively just kissed one of the players
without consent.
Oh, and followed the exact the Adam Doreen steps of disgrace, right? I saw at the bottom of the most recent article that he has since resigned or whatever. The ABC had a timeline of the events, and it was essentially your 7 steps or whatever. It was like he did the thing, he denied doing the thing. There's more pressure that he did the thing. I'm never gonna resign. He resigns. Those sorts of things. Like it was that exact flow. But no, men are terrible, and it seems like I know, George, you've talked about sort of culture in places like Italy and things like that, but you're saying that Spain can be similar.
I mean, granted, I haven't spent a lot of time in Spain, but it seems like a very similar dynamic to what I've seen in Italy, which is like I always bristled at the term rape culture because I always felt like it was this is going to sound not good, but like I always found that term to be like slightly hysterical in a way. Like it was kind of like making out like the culture was just like, that there were rapists around every corner sort of thing. And that's like, that's not the experience that a lot of people have of culture. But I don't know really what else to call this except rape culture. It seems like in a lot of European countries, there's this very laissez-faire attitude towards men basically sexually assaulting women in public, pursuing them very aggressively, which I've seen in Italy, not to just the extent of like, oh, hey, how's it going? Can I buy you a drink? But like, following women down the street, like catcalling. Like, I don't know what else to call that except like a culture of pervasive misogyny. Yeah. Like it's rape culture, right? Like that's what it is, where every interaction between a man and a woman is inherently sexualized to the point where this woman is delivering a live broadcast on television to a camera, and this guy feels so comfortable in his ability to put himself into a woman's space that he literally gropes her on live television.
Yeah, knowingly on camera.
You're in front of a camera. There's a dude with a camera on his shoulder. Like, obviously you're on camera. Like, why would you think that this is okay to do?
Yeah. I mean, you shouldn't think it's okay to do even if there wasn't a camera, but the fact that, it just
he felt so comfortable to do it in on camera.
And then hang around as well.
And then hang around.
And then hang around. So you want to have a chat? She's like, why did you do that?
I'm working. I felt like, I also felt a bit.
And her response was, I'm working, not don't fucking touch me. Don't ever touch someone without their permission. Don't just fucking touch me, let alone on my ass, but actually just like touching a random person. Like, don't touch me. She had to like defer and say like, I'm working, please. Could we take this to the side for one moment? Like, can we park this sexual assault? I'm live on television. Just unreal. The sort of,
I felt the anchor back at the news desk being like, go talk to him. Like, that's not okay. Go pursue him. I know maybe in the right place of like stand up for yourself or whatever.
He said like show him to me or something. Like basically like get him on camera. But then I think that the anchor like wanted to have a word with him, but obviously he's in an earpiece and he can't be like, can you hand him the phone and so I can tell him he's a piece of shit? Like
But I felt like Hart was in the right place of wanting to like tell this guy that like what you did's not on. It's also like you're not there. She's the one who was just groped by him, and you're further putting her like, go confront your aggressor.
Right.
Do it now.
And obviously it didn't seem like he did that deliberately, but you are putting someone in a situation where they're in an unsafe situation with a potential sexual aggressor. Like,
Yeah.
maybe don't get them into a situation where they need to
maybe
confront
don't
that person and like
pressure-
confront them on
pressure her to
camera, sort of thing.
confront them.
Like,
Yeah,
anyway,
Yeah,
so
so-
apparently the man's been arrested, and like I said, it caused a bit of a fracas online. But it's just, I think it's emblematic of the culture that we see in a lot of, seeing it in contrast with our own culture. It's like, obviously, we're much better on this sort of stuff. I don't think you'd see something like this in Australia, but it does demonstrate to me that we are on a continuum in terms of elevating the way that we think about how we as men treat women in our society. It's like, we have not arrived at the end. Like that some people seem to think like we have achieved. There are no negative ramifications from colonialism. There are no ramifications in our society from sexism. We have achieved the perfect utopian society in which all are equal and have all equality of opportunity. Like, obviously we've not arrived at that endpoint, but it just demonstrates to me how much we are very, very much still on a continuum of improving in this regard.
Real gross. I think you see it happen with like also people who are doing like Twitch live streams and stuff like that when they're out and about in the street of just people.
How so?
Oh, like I saw an example of it recently. I forget the streamer's name, but a woman who was live on Twitch or something, like, on using like on her phone. So was out and about filming herself, and someone just comes up to her and is just like physically harassing her.
Just feels free to be in her space.
Yeah. So it's gross. Men are terrible.
If you need to be reminded, don't touch anyone without permission. Just don't touch anyone.
Yep. It's the easiest thing to do is nothing. Is don't do it.
On that note, we have been, we are and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at our handle, Unnatural Show. And that's on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Threads, and motherflippin' TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Instagram, Threads, and what do I do? Twitter, Instagram, Threads, those things, at George Tsibos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can follow me nowhere. Because I am a ghost.
Because I respect your bodily autonomy, and I will not touch you, and I will not follow you around.
No, don't follow me. Please don't.
Yeah. Adam's a ghost, off the grid.
It's Jack Reacher. Thanks for listening, guys. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.